We know that these claims were mostly leveled by the campaigns and their partisan allies to gain a perceived political advantage. My main concern is that the myths and the rumors left unchallenged become conventional wisdom. However, I believe that we can all agree that a single case of fraud or disenfranchisement is unacceptable. As a result, I will be asking you to set up a local process to look at all substantiated allegations of fraud and suppression from this past election, providing a forum for those with legitimate concerns and a process for looking into them. I believe this will help reassure the public about the integrity of our elections process. You haven't heard or seen anything on an email chain or anything like that would make you question whether our election system ran right? There were no unsubstantiated rumors or myths out there, were there? But we're going to get it right. We're going to give them a forum. We're going to show people and give them a chance, if they have concerns, to go in and air them. And let me encourage you, while it's fresh in your mind, coming off this election, if there were lessons learned, things that you learned in this election cycle in your local level, things that you might be able to share with other boards of elections, write them down. Do your post-mortem and make sure you write down all of the things that you learned in this election cycle while they're fresh in your mind so that you can be prepared for 2 years and 4 years from now. And if you have things that you want us to know about that you think make a lot of sense, that we share in a broader sense, please make sure you tell us about it. State and federal policy. After every election cycle, it's always wise to reflect on what lessons we've learned, what should be changed, or even more astutely, to remind ourselves to not try to fix what isn't broken. For example, after every presidential election, there are discussions about the role of the federal government and their need to step in to resolve a problem. But before we entertain new ideas, I'm asking our federal leaders to address the shortcomings of their last solution. Specifically, the underfunded voting machine mandate and the contradictory provisions in the NDRA that allow some counties to have more voters on the rolls than people of voting age. Let me begin with the voting machines. In 2002, the federal government began involving itself with the machines we use to vote with the passage of HAVA. We're 10 years into this. Like most federal programs, it was initially funded, and now 10 years later, the machines are aging, they need maintenance, and at some point in time, they'll need replaced. Does this sound familiar to anybody? The cost of this falls on you at the local level. All right? Well, as your Secretary of State and a member of the National Association of Secretaries of State Executive Committee, and as the co-chair of the NAS Elections Committee, I will work to be your voice in Washington on these issues, because I know the day is coming where this voting machine issue is going to come home. Congress hasn't fully funded HAVA at the levels it initially authorized. Before Congress talks about new requirements, they should fully fund HAVA and commit to long-term funding to maintain accurate, transparent, and independently tested voting systems. Either provide the funding or remove the mandate and return the matter back to the states and the local elections officials. And while we talk about funding, it's worth noting that since HAVA passed and no-fault absentee became the part of our landscape, the cost of elections has increased dramatically. In fact, the Dayton Daily News reported that in 2008, the first presidential election that offered early voting and electronic voting machines, Ohio County spent $122.4 million on elections. That's compared to $67.3 million on elections just 4 years early. So it almost doubled. The cost of elections almost doubled in that 4-year period. And financial pressures have only increased, as I'm sure you all know, as costs continue to rise and revenues have stagnated or fallen in many counties. I want you to know that I plan to set up a process with the Ohio Association of Elections Officials and the County Commissioners Association in Ohio of Ohio to look at how we can better manage these costs while maintaining the best possible customer service we can provide. Now on to my concerns about the contradictions in federal law that I mentioned earlier. In February of 2012, I wrote U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder and asked the Justice Department to help us resolve the contradiction in federal law that requires us to have accurate voter rolls, but also prevents us from removing any voter until they have been inactive for 2 consecutive federal elections. This resulted in the problem that some Ohio counties had more registered voters than it had voting age adults residing in their county. We got no help from the Justice Department, and now I intend to ask the Secretaries of State from all 50 states to join us in asking for a resolution to these questions. It's 4 years before the next presidential election. That's certainly ample time to get this issue resolved. State law changes. Always popular, I know,